This is The Reset, episode number 4, with me, Shaun Tucker. And you are enough. So today what I want to talk about is something really cliche, but something really interesting. And I've noticed it within myself, but also I notice it as a pattern in so many other people, one that I work with, but also just people in general. And that is the difference between growth and self-abandonment. So this is probably the reason why pushing forward isn't actually helping the situation. Because growth, for me, should be fun. If it's not, it probably means that I'm abandoning myself. And especially if there's an abandonment wound within my being, in my memory, that's causing me to stay stuck, then it's going to be really hard to lean into growth because growth is always uncomfortable. Growth is painful. But growth should never mean suffering. Because it's the process of getting you what you want that allows you to become a greater version of what you already are. So growth should be the process. If the destination is growth, it's probably going to end up in a lot of suffering. Because pushing yourself to become someone you're not and you don't want to be, well, this is just really, it's abandoning who you are. It's telling yourself that you have to become someone that you don't like to be in order to be liked, in order to be seen, in order to be appreciated. But maybe just pause for a second and ask yourself, is this my belief or is it someone else's? Is it in my belief that growth has to be really uncomfortable, that it has to be suffering? Because do you remember, I don't know if you remember, when you were a young kid and, your body's literally growing into becoming an adult, right? Or going from a child to an adolescent, for example. I remember having growing pains. And if I reflect back to more the psychological development of who I am or who I've become or who I was and now who I am, the things that have been really testing for me is actually the growing pains, which being with the feeling of letting go and releasing was a huge challenge to be with. And it probably actually meant that I was suffering. And if suffering is optional, pain is inevitable. You can't really suffer your way to joy. You can suffer your way to ignorance, absolutely. But paining your way to joy, smiling through the process of being in pain, not turning pain into pleasure necessarily, but looking at suffering as something that really you don't want to have, something you really don't want to experience in your life. And if I look back at my mission and look back at the reasons why I do what I do, it's because I don't want anyone else to feel like I felt through the suffering that I went through to become who I am. The best way to learn for me has always been the hard way because it's the least ignorant. And every time that I'm faced with something where I've been ignorant towards my reality and just ignoring something that I've needed to face, well, that's where the suffering is heightened. And it's funny that I say this because if I'm even looking at some of the things that I find challenging in my life right now, I know that I'm choosing to suffer. But instead of suffering for the sake of suffering, I know that I'm transmuting that into it's pain. It's painful to grow. It's painful to look at these things. It's painful to actually have that in your reality and to experience that. But I know that that pain is becoming my reason for growth. It's becoming my reason to wake up in the morning and face the challenge instead of running away. Because suffering is seeing the pain and choosing not to be with it. That's my definition of what suffering is. Suffering is turning a blind eye away from something you know you can change. It's being ignorant. And if I really look at the things that have caused me the most pain in the last few years, it's because I've been ignorant. You know, you choose your hard path or you choose your harder path. Which one do you choose? I know for me, I thought I was choosing the harder path, but in actual fact, I probably was choosing the easy path. And the easy path is always the harder path because you can't cut corners. And if you do, it's eventually going to show up because that is where ignorance grows. That's where ignorance, if it goes on for too long, guess what? It turns into something that you've created for yourself to face reality with. And if I look at some of the people in my life who have probably bullied me, yeah, I actually created them to face my own reality, to show up differently, to really challenge myself and make myself uncomfortable so that I can grow into the man, into the provider, into that version of myself I know I can be. But the thing with self-abandonment, this is suffering, right? This is choosing to turn a blind eye, to move and hide under the covers when you know you're scared. One of the reasons I got into the octagon last year and chose to win through that 20-week fighter warrior training camp was because I knew I had nowhere to run. I knew that if I made my promise to the world that this is what I was going to do, well, this is what I'm going to do. It's the same reason I did with my bodybuilding as well back in 2020. It's the exact same thing that I did. It wasn't to prove myself. Maybe back in 2020 it was. It was to prove myself to someone that didn't give a shit about me. And that's okay because no one should give a shit about you except for yourself. You don't owe anyone anything. And you are good enough as you are. And if you want to become a sliced, diced, peeled version of yourself and go on stage, look, why not? Go for it. But if you're trying to meet someone else's need to be seen, to be recognized, to be validated, that's probably not the right intention behind your action steps. And instead, sitting with, when did you self-abandon? When did you start disappearing from yourself and start putting everyone else's needs before your own? It's not your job to meet the needs of others. Unless, of course, you are the caretaker, the provider for those people. But this is where boundaries are super important. If you're trying to meet the needs of everyone else and putting yourself last, it is almost impossible to pour from an empty cup. And yes, I understand when it comes to volunteering, that is pretty much what you're doing. But you're not pouring from an empty cup. You're pouring from a place of faith and trust. Right? You're giving yourself totally. You're having your needs met by being part of something bigger than yourself. But the truth is, we are actually all quite selfish beings, right? When we come out into the world, we need the milk of our mothers to keep us afloat, to keep us safe, to keep us nurtured and nourished, right? So this is the nature of who we are. And if you do become abandoned and you do have those wounds from when you were just a young child or an infant or whatever scar tissue you have, good, because that's forged who you are today. But you don't have to let it become the story of why you can't do something. Instead, let it be your story of empowerment. I faced all of these challenges and now look at who I am. You can do it too. And so I hope this message reaches someone who knows and is experiencing maybe something tough that they just didn't see it from that perspective. Because when you start abandoning yourself, well, who's going to look after you? Who's going to take care of the person who takes care of the world, who's carrying the world on their shoulders? Not even the world's going to take care of you. And maybe it's time to start seeing that, yeah, life, growth is painful, but it doesn't mean I have to suffer. It just means that I am alive and I deserve to be alive because I am alive. There's your evidence. You have skin, you have something tangible here. Anyways, in summary, you are enough. You deserve to be here. And growth is inevitable if you let it. Pain is always there. Growth and pain are very much in parallel lines. Suffering doesn't equal pain. Suffering is something that you hide away from. You're hiding away from your reality. And the reason why it becomes even more painful from that point is because you can't be with it. And that's okay. Recognizing the pattern, stepping back in, and allowing yourself to be with it. And once again, if you found this episode helpful, share it with just one person. And if you need help on your journey, don't forget to reach out to me. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next episode.